Common Filth Extra, episode 24. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for supporting what I do. And 24, is that right? That is right. So what, 24 times 2, 48. There's 50. Well, there have been some weeks where I've done 2 episodes and some weeks where I have skipped some episodes. So yeah, about 24 weeks since I started doing this. And that is almost half a year. Almost half a year. And this year feels like it just started, and this is this is the second thing that I've recorded in June. We're already halfway through the year. That's crazy to me. Time is accelerating. I don't know any other way to put it. Time never moved this quickly in my youth. Where the best of days, it seems like they go so quickly, and the boring days, school days, they go very slowly, but even in my youth, a week was a very long time. It seemed like it. Now, not so much. But you didn't pay to hear me freak out about how time is accelerating. So, what am I going to talk about on this edition of Common Filth Extra? Well, I saw the Angry Birds movie, and a lot of people sent me stuff like, "Oh, look, Angry Birds, it's so red-pilled, you should go see it. It's anti-Muslim. It's anti-immigrant. It's about the refugee crisis." I'm like, fine, I'll go see it. So I saw it on Tuesday where the ticket prices are discounted. So I didn't pay the full price for a ticket. So saw Angry Birds. A couple days ago as of this recording. And first of all, I'd like to say I liked it a lot. It was really entertaining. A lot better than I thought it was going to be. So a fun movie, and a lot of people sent me a link to a YouTube review, which I will link to in the notes. But if you look up Leo Pirate Angry Birds on YouTube, you can find it. But I will leave a text file with the link in your download. So look for that. It's on YouTube again. But in this review, and it's a good review, and featured some things I didn't consider, some interpretations of the movie I didn't consider. Basically, the plot is, here's the bird island, the pigs come and show up, and they're like, "Oh, we're taking your eggs." And sorry, spoilers, this is going to be a spoiler kind of thing, which I don't think you give a shit about. I never cared about, oh my god, spoilers, don't spoil it for me, as if the ending is the only reason I'm watching. Like, for example, I saw the Hank Williams movie not too long ago, and I know how that story ends. Hank Williams is dead. And I get it, in a biographical movie, you don't really care about the ending so much, but it's all the same to me. It's about the journey, not the destination. Anyway, Angry Birds. Pigs come on their ship and colonize the bird island. And they're happy, naive people, the birds, and the main character, the red one, he doesn't like these pigs, and the pigs are buttering up the people with their good party times, and it turns out that the pigs who are colonizing the bird island, they just want their eggs. They want bird eggs for their feast to take back to Pig Island. So that's the basic premise of it. And a lot of people have been saying that this movie is a commentary on the refugee crisis in Europe. And in the video that I mentioned, the Leo Pirate review, there were some very good observations, like the 3 main protagonists, the birds, their colors are the colors of the German flag. And I cannot refute that interpretation on its own. Another one that I didn't consider was the hero, the guy that the red bird looks up to. The red bird looks up to the eagle, like, he's gonna save us all. What do we do? So they go find him, and he's a washed up guy, and reliving past glories. He's got a big gut. And the reviewer makes a really good observation that this eagle character represents a washed up United States that these simple bird people look up to, and they need a hero. And he's not a hero anymore. He's lazy and a joke now. So that was a good one. But Beyond these two pretty solid interpretations of the characters in the movie and what they represent, I think there's more evidence to contradict this narrative of Angry Birds being an anti-refugee movie. And I'll give you a number of reasons. I'll give you my interpretation. In the movie, the birds are portrayed as sort of a noble savage. You know, they're not third world. Everybody on the island's pretty nice. They're mostly naive except for Red, the red bird. And their homes, their technology, not quite impressive compared to the pig people. Or the pigs, rather. They aren't people, they're pigs. The pig civilization. And you find this out when in the movie the pigs arrive on the island and they bring all this cool stuff and impress the bird people with their song and dance and all of these neat inventions. So pig civilization more technologically advanced. And I understand they do carry TNT with them, haha, Allah Akbar, explodey jokes. But beyond that, the pig people, there's nothing to indicate that they're actually Muslim. And I'll explain further. When we find out why the pigs are there and the birds are like, oh, they're just here to, live with us and they're nice. They have cool parties and music and food and inventions. Wow, so cool. They find out that the pigs are there to steal babies, steal eggs. And, they find this out too late. So they take all the eggs. The pig people take it back to their pig island. And so the birds make their way to the pig island after assembling a boat using whatever the pigs left behind. So the birds make it there, and they see a kingdom that's walled off and is more impressive than theirs, a much more impressive civilization. Their architecture's more impressive. They have billboard advertisements. They have bowling alleys. The pigs have a lot of stuff. The pigs have a lot of inventions, a lot of advanced things. They have their own air force, their own military, and a couple of interesting things. And this was also pointed out in the review that was brought to my attention. There's a vehicle in the movie that's on the pig island, and it has a coexist bumper sticker and all of the religious symbolism on the coexist sticker is removed except for the crescent moon representing Islam, and the O is like the pig snout. And this strengthens the narrative that this is an anti-refugee movie. It does, but we have to consider the sticker itself. When I was in Idaho back in October, the first hour I touched the ground, got my rental car driving around, I saw a coexist bumper sticker in a parking lot, on a car, not just sitting there, but it was on a car. And that was after I saw like 2 Bernie Sanders signs on people's front lawns. So those coexist stickers are a white liberal thing, a damn near exclusively white liberal thing. And then there was another scene where they're building a Amnesty International, this building that has a big Amnesty International plastered on the top of it. This is obviously a play of words off of Amnesty International, which is a favorite of white liberals everywhere. I don't think Muslims have their own version where they're advocating for the rights of disenfranchised whitey that has somehow made their way into the jurisdictions of Arab kingdoms. Another thing to consider, the pigs all look the same, more or less. They're different shapes and sizes, but they're all green. Compare that with the birds, they're all different colors. And what started the whole conflict between the birds and the pigs? The pigs colonized the bird island. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But there are other interesting things in the mise en scène of the movie, if I could use a film school term. In the banquet room of the pigs in the castle where the king lives, there's a pig seated at the table that's made out to look like Johnny Depp playing Hunter S. Thompson in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Hunter S. Thompson is a white American fuck you dad baby boomer hero. I pulled up his wiki quote page, and he said, Richard Nixon has never been one of my favorite people anyway. Richard Nixon might as well be a stand-in for dad for white liberals. The guy's been dead for how long? And if you listen to some of the Nixon tapes, he's a straight shooter. talking about how the Bohemian Grove, the faggiest goddamn thing he's ever seen, and how the values today, everybody's promoting faggotry. So of course white liberals hate Richard Nixon. He's that authority figure they're constantly rebelling against. And here's a Hunter S. Thompson lookalike pig in the domain of the Pig King. So combine that with the coexist sticker, combine that with the Amnesty International thing. Factor in the fact that the pigs are more technologically advanced. I think you're looking at a representation of white liberals in the pigs. The pigs in Angry Birds, the Angry Birds movie. So there is some evidence to indicate that the Angry Birds movie has something to say about the refugee crisis in Europe. But it has just as much to say about liberal colonization. A couple of other details I forgot to mention. As you see more of the castle, there's a picture for the Shakespeare work, Hamlet. And we know about Shakespeare's reputation. One of the greatest Western civilization has to offer. Don't need to say it. And I don't mean just greatest as in greatest artist, greatest writer. One of the examples of what we have achieved. But I've said this before, I say it again, I'm not backing down from this. Colonization has been our greatest albatross. The result of colonization, globalization. And we are living with the horrible consequences of that. But that's not what I was planning on talking about. Angry Birds. The Angry Birds movie, if it's still playing by the time you hear this, check it out. It's pretty good. Hunter S. Thompson. Yeah, no wonder why. Let's read that quote about Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon has never been one of my favorite people anyway. For years I've regarded his existence as a monument to all the rancid genes and broken chromosomes that corrupt the possibilities of the American dream. He was a foul caricature of himself, a man with no soul, no inner convictions. Oh, fuck you. Your entire conviction is, I'm gonna use a bunch of drugs and go on a road trip. That's your conviction, you faggot. With the integrity of a hyena and the style of a poisoned toad, the Nixon I remembered was absolutely humorless. I couldn't imagine him laughing at anything except maybe a paraplegic who wanted to vote Democrat, but couldn't quite reach the lever on the voting machine. No wonder why white liberal baby boomers like this guy so much. Actually, we're on WikiQuote. We'll go to the Richard Nixon page here. And I'm down to his quote now. And I'll read it. This is from Richard Nixon. And you can also listen to this on YouTube. But it's not just the ratty part of town. No, wait, you know what? I'm going to read this whole thing. Taped transcripts in 1971. You know what happened to the Romans? The last 6 Roman emperors were fags. Neither in a public way. You know what happened to the popes? They were laying the nuns. That's been going on for years. Centuries. But the Catholic Church went to hell 3 or 4 centuries ago. It was homosexual and it had to be cleaned out. That's what happened to Britain. It happened earlier to France. Let's look at all the strong societies. The Russians, goddamn, they root them out. They don't let them around at all. I don't know what they do with them. Look at this country. You think the Russians allow dope? Homosexuality, dope, immorality are the enemies of strong societies. He understands this. Why doesn't every 19, 20, 21-year-old dipshit on the alt-right understand this? Why and beyond that, every 19, 20, 21-year-old liberal dipshit voting for whoever, Bernie Sanders. They don't get it. Or I guess Hillary Clinton's a more identity politics candidate. Yeah, I saw some on TV, and she, when they're at the podium, the politicians are at the podium, they're talking, they have all the people in the background. Yeah, she had a bunch of fags in the background. Homosexuality, dope, immorality are the enemies of strong societies. We are reading Nixon quotes again. That's why the communists and left-wingers are clinging to one another. They're trying to destroy us. I know Moynihan will disagree with this, Mitchell will, and Garment will, but goddamn, we have to stand up to this. Correct. No wonder why everybody had it out for him. But it's not just the ratty part of town. The upper class in San Francisco is that way. The Bohemian Grove. And I'm gonna tell you about Bohemian Grove in a little bit, because this ties back in with Hunter S. Thompson. It's like poetry. It rhymes. It's like poetry. The Bohemian Grove, which I attend from time to time, is the most faggy goddamn thing you could ever imagine with that San Francisco crowd. I can't shake hands with anybody from San Francisco. Decorators, they got to do something, but we don't have to glorify it. You know, one of the reasons fashions have made women look so terrible is because of the goddamn designers hate women. Because the goddamn designers hate women. And has it changed? It's worse. Every supermodel, every runway model, everyone involved in the fashion industry, every model in the fashion industry, they have the body of a 12-year-old boy, which is what their handlers are attracted to. Their handlers being faggot males. Gee, they like the bodies of 12-year-old boys. I wonder why that is. Designers we was Romans, we was Greeks. And that's good. It's a last stand of implicit white identity, right? Fucking faggots. Designers taking it out on the women. Now they're trying to get some more sexy things coming on again. Yeah, that's not true, but yeah, designers taking it out on women. You can see the trajectory of civilization as the trajectory of morality in a civilization declines. You see it by how they treat their women. You can see the signs of it by how we treat our women. How many young men out there talk about women in the most disparaging of ways? And you know I'm not some feminist here, but they completely reject the idea of having a healthy relationship with the opposite sex. They completely discard the idea of building a life that's only possible through marriage, through heterosexual monogamy, the bedrock of every society. I was listening to Ravi Zacharias. I was listening to one of his Let My People Think broadcasts. And that's on rzim.org, if I'm not mistaken. Really good. He has a bunch of half-hour lectures on a bunch of different subjects that are all absolutely fantastic, and I recommend them. I give them my highest recommendation. But he made a great observation. He said that God created the home before he created the church. Think about that. And we are rejecting the foundation upon which homes are built. Young men, they hate women. I see this all the time. Girls, I'm afraid of vaginas. Girls are terrible. Traps are better. Traps being transsexuals, men cosplaying as women. Really, males cosplaying as females, but this is how you know you're in terminal decline. How do the Arab oil money guys treat women? We talked about that. The Dubai porta potties, they hire Instagram models. They pay them tens of thousands of dollars so they could shit on the faces of these women. What we are becoming, what we have become, terrifies me. Look at what the young people are doing. And you'll find out where we'll be in 20, 30 years. Fashion designers hate women. Everyone on some anonymous image board hates women. How many young people are modeling their behavior off of some faggot like, I don't know, the Greek Jew guy. Whatever the fuck his name is. Young men, this is their hero. You know, people send me pictures of this guy getting choked out by his boyfriend. And he's tied up in like Donald Trump ties and shit. Sick. This is how you want your fellow man to treat one another? This is how you want men to treat each other. This is how you want men to treat each other. Well, let's engage a little BDSM together. Yeah, that's how functional men behave. Functional men view other men as a potential cum dumpster. So, Hunter S. Thompson. We are getting into the realm of some pretty heavy conspiracy theory here, but I think it is a fascinating one. This is from educateyourself.org, educate-yourself.org. I don't know how much of this is true. I don't know how much of this I agree with, but we are on the topic of it, and I think it is worth exploring. And I will link to this in the text file that I will include in the download of this episode, so check your folder for it, copy and paste it, and you can read along. Okay, so it says, Johnny Gotch, Jeff Gannon, Hunter Thompson, and the unraveling of a troubling tale. Noreen Gotch sits in a booth at the West Des Moines Village Inn, nursing a cup of coffee. And by the way, this is from April 6, 2005. But this is by Tim Schmidt. Noreen Gotch sits in a booth at the West Des Moines Village Inn, nursing a cup of coffee and managing, despite her larger-than-life personality, to blend into the surroundings and keep a low profile in the almost empty restaurant. She's open with her thoughts and willing to share what information she can, yet she remains guarded, cautious, and thoughtful in a manner often mistaken as cold and standoffish. She thinks carefully as she speaks about her son Johnny Gotch, and the players in a bizarre conspiracy surrounding his disappearance in 1982 that continues to evolve and may finally be on the verge of breaking down. Just because you don't want to believe something is true, that doesn't mean it's not true, says Noreen slowly. It's a statement that bears repeating. Just because you don't want to believe something is true, that doesn't mean it's not true. Anyone who has heard the theories surrounding Johnny Gotch's appearance on September 5th, 1982, and who in Iowa has not, knows they are difficult to accept. If there are satanic pedophiles working in the top levels of government and law enforcement, selling kids on the black market and forcing them into prostitution, pornography, extortion, and things far worse, it's easier as a human being to simply believe that such things could not be true. But they could be. And Noreen knows this all too well. She didn't want to believe her child was kidnapped, sexually abused, tortured, brainwashed, and sold into slavery. But she accepts this now as an indisputable truth, and she is not alone. Many others accept the existence of a vast network of high-profile people, powerful politicians, business leaders, law enforcement, and government agents who exist in a subculture of degenerates who participate in child pornography, snuff films, drugs, devil worship, brainwashing, and kidnapping. And Noreen believes that Johnny and hundreds of other children like him was forced into this life of depravity by those who kidnapped him. But Johnny's story has been told thousands of times. It's been analyzed, disputed, and ridiculed just as frequently, and we have neither the time and space nor the inclination to repeat it here in full. As tragic as it may be, it's old news. Nothing major has happened in the case for some time, and the alleged players in the story have been silent, absent, or simply missing for years until recently. In the past few months, there's been a flurry of activity among the people once related to his case and the conspiracy that surrounds it. And in the midst of this commotion, some believe Johnny Gotch has been found very much alive. Recent events began with Jeff Gannon, the right-wing journalist who is found to have gained access to the White House press pool with few credentials and a fake name. The death of Hunter S. Thompson followed shortly after. The arrest of two men seemingly unrelated in Nebraska and Virginia within days of the Gannon story and Thompson's death also play a role in the story. And all these events, some suggest, are related to the 12-year-old paperboy kidnapped from West Des Moines 23 years ago. And if they are right, there's much more to come. Johnny lives. In late January, a conservative journalist in Washington, D.C. was found to have gained access to the White House press pool despite using a fake name, and despite the fact that he once worked as a high-priced homosexual escort. Jeff Gannon was a White House correspondent for Talad News, who regularly attended White House press briefings and at least 4 press conferences with President George W. Bush. On January 26, 2005, Gannon asked a question of the president that was so friendly and factually inaccurate that some of his colleagues began looking into his background. Talon News, it was learned, is a barely disguised tool of the Republican Party, and Gannon's credentials as a journalist consist solely of a training course at the Leadership Broadcast School of Journalism. After 2 days of training that cost $50, Gannon was officially a graduate of a journalism school and on his way to the White House press pool. It was soon discovered that Gannon's real name is Jeff Guckert, and that he has also gone by the nickname Bulldog when listing himself on the internet as a homosexual escort and personal trainer, charging $200 per hour for his discreet services. See, everyone in politics is suspect. Everyone is the worst kind of faggot because they have no other way to satisfy their power process. They can't have actual families, and if they do, well, God knows what they're doing with them. Oh wait, well, no, God knows and we know too. That Australia thing. Oh, 2 dads are better than 1. Saying, guys, this Russian kid they adopted, well, it's actually a star in many child pornography movies. Child pornography ring. This kid they adopted, it's their son. And we're just like, this isn't a problem. This isn't a problem. It's just, I try to get through to people, and some people I have. And for that, I am grateful. What I am not grateful for is the fact that I share so much in common with those who have forgotten the most obvious things, who are completely oblivious to what makes society function, what makes people function, personal function, just being personally functional. People have no idea. And maybe they never will. Gannon was removed from the White House and resigned from Talon News on February 8th. Gannon Gate quickly became the presidential scandal of the hour, though the story faded from public view as politicians and the media eagerly turned their attention to such pressing matters as steroids in baseball and the Terry Schiavo situation. That's what we cared about in 2005? Some months later, there was the Grand Theft Auto San Andreas hot coffee scandal, which Hillary Clinton, of all people, chimed in on. So stupid. Okay. Continuing. But before long, internet bloggers had picked up the story and began to think back to the administration of President Bush's father, which was rocked by a scandal that allegedly involved a high-level official giving private late-night tours of the White House to teenage male prostitutes. The New York Times and the Washington Post both wrote about the story and the eventual death of Washington lobbyist Craig Spence, who reportedly arranged the visits. Spence, it has been suggested, was preparing to admit publicly that he was using the teenage boys to blackmail high-powered politicians in the Beltway. He committed suicide before he had the opportunity to do so. Yeah, suicide. It's always interesting the timing of these suicides, isn't it? With a gay escort gaining access to the White House during a Bush administration, while many of the same officials from the 80s are back in power, the question became, is there a connection? Private investigator Sherman H. Skolnick posted a story about the Gannon debacle on Rents.com, a site known for its conspiracy theories, and publicly stated on February 19th that Gannon is Johnny Gotch. Andy Stevenson, a blogger from Seattle familiar with the details of the Johnny Gotch case and the child sex rings in Nebraska detailed in the book The Franklin Cover-Up, began with a group of other writers and investigators to ponder the claim. They looked at markings on Gannon's body and compared them to those reported on Johnny Gotch. They considered the lack of personal information about Gannon's early years. They considered that Johnny was alleged to have been used as a gay prostitute for blackmail purposes. They considered that the high-powered people alleged to have kidnapped and brainwashed children as part of the government's Monarch Project and MK Ultra program, including Johnny, did so to use them in a variety of ways to advance their own agendas. And they contacted Noreen Gotch and discussed the idea with her, the first she'd heard of the theory, and they too came to the conclusion that Jeff Gannon is none other than Johnny Gotch. The internet has been abuzz with the theory ever since, and in a way it makes perfect sense. You've got a kid abducted and brainwashed into doing the bidding of government officials as part of top-secret mind control programs. So now that he's older, why not put him into the White House to soften press briefings, to make the president look better? The suggestion for many is that Gannon is a Monarch program child turned adult operative. Gannon, according to investigators like Skolnick, is involved in high-level espionage and is also an expert on torture. He's said to be an expert penetration agent using sex to compile negative data on U.S. and foreign governmental officials, and is also believed responsible for the Valerie Plame White House leak that allegedly caused 70 CIA undercover agents to be murdered. Yet others suggest that Gotch took on the persona of James Gannon / Jeff Guckert and gained White House access with the eventual goal of exposing the people who kidnapped him and put him and his family through hell. Gannon is alleged to have a publishing deal with a Russian imprint, which some believe will result in a tell-all book that exposes those who paid for his services, as well as the pedophile ring that he, as Gotch, was victimized by after his kidnapping. I'm convinced 99% that he is Johnny Gotch, says Ted Gunderson, a retired FBI agent who has been working on the Gotch case for more than a decade. The only way I'd be 100% sure if there was a DNA test or if he admitted it. He bases his opinion on a confidential source from whom he claims to have videotape testimony that has him identifying Gannon as Gotch. My source has told me in the past that he has maintained contact with Johnny Gotch, says Gunderson. Let's just say he's in a position to know. The kids are all in touch with each other. It's a bond they all share. A bond of being rape victims. That's comforting, right? That's your only it's your only source of commonality with people. That is highly upsetting, the idea of that. Everything about it, not just the idea. The kids he refers to are those forced into the sex slavery rings and the government-sponsored mind and behavior control programs. One of those kids is a man named Paul Bonacci, who claims to have participated in the kidnapping of Johnny Gotch and says he was forced to be the first person to molest Johnny. Bonacci has long claimed to be part of the vast network of children trained to work for the government and participate in deviant sexual acts to make the blackmail of politicians possible. In 1999, Bonacci won a $1 million lawsuit against Larry King, the former head of the Franklin Credit Union in Nebraska. Not the media Larry King, whom he claimed forced him into the pedophile ring. The federal judge ruled Bonacci was truthful in his testimony, which included his claim that he was one of several young male prostitutes known to have toured the White House in the 1980s. So that's a pretty convincing piece of evidence. Gunderson claims that Bonacci is not the source for the Gannon is Gotch claim, but adds that Bonacci informed him a while back that Gotch had changed his appearance. John DeCamp, the author of The Franklin Cover-Up, says Bonacci told him the same thing. I do know that Johnny Gotch altered his appearance, and the changes I've heard about conformed how Gannon looks now. He says, Paul told me you could be standing right next to him and not know it's Johnny. And he says that Gannon has been asked the question but refuses to answer one way or the other. A fellow in New York City went to his door and asked him about his mother in Iowa, and he slammed the door on him, he says. He wouldn't talk about it at all. A mother's instinct. Noreen Gotch has seen the videotape that Gunderson made with his confidential informant and believes the man is credible. Ted sent me a videotape of his interview with his source, and he said Gannon is Gotch. And he said it without hesitation and without blinking an eye, recalls Noreen. And he said he's known it for months. When the theory was first proposed, Noreen's phone was ringing every 15 minutes with calls from bloggers, investigators, and radio and TV stations, all asking if she would identify Gannon as her son. She has not done so. She sat with the numerous photos from the internet and compared them to those of Johnny herself and John Gotch Sr., looking for similar features. I could see some of the similarities that the bloggers were talking about, she says. I could see in Gannon the features that Johnny had. And the last time I saw Paul Bonacci, he told me that Johnny had changed his entire appearance again, that he shaved his head and is going with that look for now. She says the birthmark on Johnny's chest is very similar to a mark seen on Gannon's chest in at least one photo. And she points out that Gannon has a spot on his right cheek in the same place as Johnny. Sometimes she's almost convinced, but it's not quite enough, and she can't or won't say for sure that Gannon is her son. People have asked me why I can't recognize him if I saw him in 1997, and I tell them a picture from the internet is a lot different than someone sitting in your kitchen, she says. Noreen claims that Johnny visited her at West Des Moines apartment in 1997, but he told her he could not come out of hiding because his life and hers would be put in grave danger. But what about her gut feeling, her maternal instinct? Honestly, it changes, she says. Sometimes I think, oh yeah, that looks like him, and other times the jump is just too much to think about. When you factor in the facts, it's hard to believe. I've spent a lot of sleepless nights over this. I really wish I could say for sure. But Noreen is no fool. She knows the risk of saying one way or the other if she thinks this is her son, if it is, and he's chosen not to say anything. She understands that he has reasons for secrecy that are likely life-threatening, and her outing him could very well put him at risk. If she were to claim Gannon is Johnny and is proven wrong later, then any amount of credibility she has left would go out the window. Even if he admitted to it, Gannon, I would still want a DNA test done, she says. This is so surreal. It's like I'm on the outside looking in. Almost 23 years have passed, and we know he's still alive, but to potentially have your loved one found is just unreal. If this would turn out to be Johnny, it would be a blessing for everyone to know what happened and to have it all wrapped up. Subliminal hints. That is unlikely to happen anytime soon. Despite millions of words devoted to the subject on the web and investigations being concluded by hundreds of internet detectives, Gannon has not acknowledged this speculation. Despite this, some say that Gannon has been providing clues to his real identity on his webpage, which is still active. Which I don't know if it's still active, by the way. What if I find some crazy thing right now if I type in jeffgannon.com right now? Okay. Yeah, this is it's domain parked. I think that's the term. Regardless, it's like one of those under construction, is available for sale, so the website is not active. Shortly after the theory was presented, Gannon posted an article titled Hiding in Plain Sight and has posted a column titled Fear and Loathing in the Press Room, which some suggest is a reference to the recently deceased Hunter S. Thompson, who was also accused of involvement in pedophile child slavery rings in the 1980s. And then there we go. There's the Hunter S. Thompson connection. Others suggest that his name itself is a clue to his real identity. Both Jeff Gannon and James Guckert share the same initials as Johnny Gotch. Furthermore, shortly after Johnny's disappearance, Noreen made a personal plea to the editor of the Des Moines Register, Johnny's employer. The editor printed her letter in the paper and mocked it by allowing the police department to dissect it. The editor's name was James Gannon. I would say, though, that those are subliminal messages, says Gunderson, an attempt on Gannon's part to let slip his identity. See, when you say subliminal, that's where you lose people, so... Look, I'm not going to be one of these people and be like, oh, this one little thing, this one little weird thing disproves it all, I hate it when people are like that. Jim Rothstein, a retired New York police detective who spent more than 35 years in the force, much of it investigating child slavery, pedophile rings, agrees that the evidence is strong that Gannon is actually Johnny Gotch. To me, Gannon looks like Johnny, says Rothstein. Everything just fits, the profile, the MO, everything. Rothstein has been involved as a private investigator on the Gotch case for the past several years, and he says he is working to get the final proof needed to determine Gannon's true identity. We're working on getting a tail on him and getting a DNA sample to test, he says. I still can't figure out why no one knows where he was for 10 years. Gannon. He being Gannon. There have been some internet postings that give a timeline of Gannon's life, but according to Rothstein, they are based on flimsy information that is not to be trusted. Records are easy to create, he says. Maybe this Guckert kid died and someone took over his identity. If it's not Johnny Gotch, then it's one of the other kids like Johnny Gotch. Says Noreen, if this is all true, I don't think he was ready to be exposed just yet. Hunter and snuff films. Here's where it gets really crazy. The Gannon-Gotch connection was first made public early in the morning on September 20th. Later that day, Hunter S. Thompson was found dead in his home, the victim of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot. Few people would ever have thought to connect Thompson and Gotch, but those familiar with the tales of child abuse and pedophilia documented in The Franklin Cover-Up, a book first released in 1994 by former Nebraska State Senator John DeCamp, understand the association. In his book, DeCamp relates many interviews and discussions with Paul Bonacci, the young man who claims to have been involved with the kidnapping of Johnny Gotch. Bonacci told horrific tales of being forced into sex with adults and other children. In one case, he recalls being flown into Nevada with another young boy whom he did not know. They took on another passenger there and headed to a secluded location where Bonacci says he was forced to have sex with the younger boy. The young boy Bonacci claims in this book was also forced to have sex with adult males, who then killed the boy with a gunshot to the head. Bonacci says he was then forced to have sex with the corpse. The passenger they took on in Nevada filmed the entire thing, and Bonacci recalled that his name was Hunter Thompson. I think it's kind of strange that Hunter Thompson would commit suicide at this time, says Gunderson. Several kids told us that he directed snuff films. I think it's a strong possibility that he was murdered, and I strongly suspect that it's all connected. Or he killed himself because he didn't want to be tied in with this horrible hair-raising stuff. But he did choose to involve himself in this, so consequences, motherfucker. And the speculation on the internet has been that Thompson was either killed to prevent his coming forward, or that he killed himself because he feared his role as a director of child snuff films would be proven true. DeCamp also expressed some surprise at the timing of Thompson's death, and he says he still believes Bonacci's claim is true. Stevenson, the blogger from Seattle who has investigated the Gotch case, is also suspicious. I wonder, did he know? In light of Paul Bonacci's testimony regarding the snuff film, I submit he knew quite a bit, he says. The timing of his death was interesting. The snuff film that Thompson allegedly made with Paul Bonacci is believed, based on Bonacci's description of the surroundings, to have been filmed at Bohemian Grove, a summer camp of sorts for the rich and powerful. Bohemian Grove is a secluded area outside of Sacramento, California, where world leaders and dignitaries meet annually for a retreat that involves neo-pagan activities. Yeah, it does work out, and never mind. I'm in attack everyone mode lately, so I'll refrain for now. For a retreat that involves neo-pagan activities, including mock human sacrifices made before a large owl statue referred to as Moloch. While conducting this ritual, which they call the cremation of care, participants are dressed in druid robes and chant and sing before Moloch. Information on these gatherings has been well known for some time. The video footage has only recently been leaked out of the site. The site is very secure and access is available only to a handful of people worldwide. As a child, Bonacci could never have had access to the site, but he described it accurately, including the large owl statue. Noreen Gotch says that on one recent evening, her website, johnnygotch.com, had more than 50 hits that came from within a 10-mile radius of Bohemian Grove. And then we get to the section called The CIA Pedophile. In her book, Why Johnny Can't Come Home, Noreen Gotch writes about a man who contacted her just 6 months after Johnny's disappearance, claiming he worked with a government agency that was investigating pedophile organizations. George Paul Bishop, often known just as Paul Bishop, claimed he was a CIA asset and arrived in Des Moines in July of 1984 to offer his assistance to the Gotches. Before he left, he provided, through his investigation, a detailed map of the kidnapping scene. Bishop, according to Noreen's book, often called the Gotch home from the Washington, D.C. office of Senator Charles Grassley, with whom Noreen had worked on Johnny's case. Many times Paul Bishop would call me from Senator Grassley's office when finished speaking with me. He would hand the phone to one of Grassley's aides, who I was familiar with, Noreen called in her book published in 2000. That convinced me Paul was an accepted visitor on the Hill in Washington. Based on this, Noreen believed that Bishop was responsible for securing her invitation to testify before Senator Arlen Specter's hearing on organized crime and its relation to kidnapping at the U.S. Capitol. Bishop, in fact, picked Noreen up from her D.C. hotel and accompanied her to the hearings. Bishop became close to Noreen, even referring to her as Mom. But suddenly, in 1985, he disappeared from the scene. The phone number he left was no longer valid, and no one knew how to contact him. No one had seen or heard from him in almost 20 years, until he was suddenly arrested on February 4th of this year in Virginia, after police allegedly found an explicit video of a 16-year-old boy in his home. Detectives searched Bishop's home and found the tape after receiving a complaint that he was allowing teenage boys to drink and use drugs on the premises. Noreen wonders now if Bishop was on the wrong side of Johnny's case all along. Was he involved in the kidnapping and merely running a smoke screen at the time to prevent discovery? Was his recent arrest an effort to keep him quiet about the larger story, a threat? Or was he honest from the beginning and his recent arrest merely an effort to discredit him before he reappeared and started making noise and threatening to expose the powerful people involved? Either way, Bishop seemed to know a lot about Johnny's disappearance in 1982, and his sudden reappearance on the scene, coinciding with the outing of Jeff Gannon, the death of Thompson, and the arrest of another man involved with the case below is too much of a coincidence for some to accept. It's very common to set someone up and arrest him to discredit him, says Rothstein. The photographer. Rusty Nelson claimed that he once turned down an offer of $50,000 from Hunter S. Thompson to help in the production of a snuff film. The offer was allegedly made because Nelson worked closely with Larry King, the central figure in the Franklin cover-up, accused of running a pedophile and child slavery ring. Nelson would often accompany King to elaborate parties where he worked as a photographer, taking photos of high-profile individuals in compromising positions with young boys and girls. Nelson testified in court that he participated as a photographer, but claims that that though he took compromising photos, he never took any hardcore pornographic pictures, that he absolutely refused any involvement with child pornography. But he claims that King employed a Nelson lookalike for this purpose in order to compromise both the powerful people in the photos and Nelson himself. Nelson has admitted taking tens of thousands of photos, many of which have been confiscated and either destroyed or permanently sealed to protect those depicted. But many, according to some reports, remain hidden. Despite his denials, Nelson has served time for his photography work, having been arrested in Oregon years ago with a van full of photos, at least one of which was said to involve a minor engaged in less than legal activity. He's been living in Nebraska for some time, providing what information he can to private investigators and trying to put his life back together. Most recently, he was working with a friend to open a studio that specializes in wedding photography. But 2 days after Thompson's death, Nelson was rounded up by police and arrested, reportedly for failing to register as a sex offender in a county of which he was no longer a resident. This is insane, and credit to the author of this for linking all of this information together. John DeCamp bailed Nelson out of jail and says he thinks the arrest was intended as a warning to him and others that they best keep their mouths shut. Others agree. The timing is interesting, says Stevenson, especially given Thompson's death and Paul Bishop's recent arrest. I would place a suicide watch on both men. I think there's fixin' to be a heap of manure hitting the air circulating device soon, he adds. I wonder about the timing. I've been wondering why all these people have all of a sudden come out of the woodwork. I wonder if there's a purge going on. I don't think injustice ever leaves the public consciousness. I think there's far more going on here than we know. So why now? After all this time, why the activity and renewed interest in the Johnny Gotch case and the tales of child abduction, slavery, and prostitution in general? Did the theory that Gannon is actually Johnny Gotch hit too close to home and threaten to expose those with secrets to keep? One suggestion is that increased media attention has the players in the decades-old scandal getting jumpy and looking to protect themselves. Well, I think they've done pretty good because I haven't heard anything about this since. In 11 years. In the 11 years, I didn't hear about this until some number of years after this article was published. Nick Bryant, the man who confronted Gannon at his home and asked him about Johnny Gotch, has apparently been working on this story for several years and has been shopping the finished product around for a publisher. Rothstein says he's been working with Bryant for at least 3 years and that Bryant was originally commissioned to do the story for Rolling Stone, which has since turned the finished piece down. The New York Times and several other outlets have reportedly shown interest in the story recently as well. Bryant declined to comment on either on the Gannon situation or his involvement in writing a story. But Rothstein says since Bryant began showing the piece around, the players involved have once again become active. Something is cooking here now, he says. They'll have to throw someone to the wolves, but there's no telling how high it will go. Everyone involved in the story acknowledges that it sounds like a wacky conspiracy theory, but the evidence of the conspiracy is too vast, they say, to simply dismiss it. I'm a conspiracy realist, because there is a conspiracy out there, says Gunderson, who says just 2 weeks ago he was chased through his neighborhood by an unknown man with a gun. Adds Rothstein, if 2 people were involved in kidnapping that kid, then it's a conspiracy. Well, these people don't work alone, so it's a conspiracy. They try to discredit you by calling you a conspiracy theorist. Damn right I'm a conspiracy theorist, because that's what it is. Still, in the end, this is a story about a young boy stolen from his home and family. The simple tragedy is often lost in the complicated theories and conjecture, but it remains a single, undeniable truth in the entire story. I hold out hope we'll be able to have regular communications with him, Noreen says of her son. We know he's alive, and up until a couple years ago, we knew what he was doing and where. Maybe he could keep in touch with his mom, but moving back to Des Moines to live a life here, those windows of opportunity have closed. I hear the horrible things people say about me. I can only imagine what they would say about him, given the things he's been through. Johnny knows I tried, and who's to say it's all over? We don't know yet. If this is it, we're in the final days and this is all going to blow wide open. Well, I hate to end it on a bummer here, but 11 years later, and I'm probably the only one, other than the people involved, who has talked about this. It is a crazy world out there, full of horrible abominations, corruption, deviancy, treachery, and it's only getting crazier.